Julian was out for a stroll with his pet dog Spike when he noticed a massive plant that appeared out of place. Julian couldn't help but feel chills go down his spine when Spike began to bark at it. Nevertheless, things only got stranger when a ranger abruptly showed up and told Julian to leave the area. Who had planted this unique plant in the forest, and what made it so special? Julian had no clue, but he quickly learned that his finding would completely alter the course of his life. As Julian noticed Spike inspecting the odd plant, his heart began to race. In an effort to catch Spike's attention and get him away from the possibly dangerous plant, he shouted to his dog right away. "Get away from there!" Julian yelled, his voice resonating with urgency and worry. He was aware that a dog had no business here, and he couldn't take a chance on Spike getting wounded by the strange plant. Julian had never seen anything like this before, and he was certain they had to leave this location as quickly as possible. He took hold of Spike's leash and began guiding him away from the area while keeping a watchful eye on him. Julian's attempt to escape the unknown plant was thwarted by a ranger, who was followed by 2 hovering helicopters. Julian was approached by the ranger, who informed him that they would need to leave immediately and that Julian was not meant to have witnessed what was occurring in the forest. The ranger's comments and the presence of the helicopters left Julian baffled and worried. He questioned what exactly was so special about this specific woodland that such a response was necessary. He also couldn't get rid of his curiosity about what type of plant he and Spike had discovered that had raised such a red flag. Although he hoped the ranger would answer some of his questions, he was equally ready for the potential that he might not receive any answers at all. Julian anticipated his day to start off like any other day. He got out of bed, got dressed, and went downstairs. When he went down the stairs, he realized Spike, his cherished dog, was not waiting to greet him as usual. "Spike! Spike!" Julian yelled to his pup. When he realized that Spike was nowhere to be seen, he became worried since he couldn't imagine where his dog might have gone. When he was searching the home, Julian started to yell his dog's name. He looked through every room, but Spike was nowhere to be seen. Julian couldn't get rid of the mounting sense of worry he was experiencing. He was aware that Spike was a well-behaved dog who never wandered far from his house, so he was baffled as to why his dog would go somewhere without a trace. Julian couldn't help but worry where Spike may be and if he was all right while he kept looking. Spike surprised Julian by rushing at him as he opened the entrance to the yard. He wondered if he forgot to let Spike back in the house the night before, but he soon brushed off the thought and concentrated on feeding and preparing his dog for their journey. Julian liked exploring the nature around his little town, which was tucked between 2 mountain ranges. Whether it was a secret waterfall or a remote meadow, there was always something new to find. Living in this small town gave Julian a sense of adventure and freedom to explore nature that he was looking for. Looking forward to the new views and experiences the day would offer, he packed his hiking supplies and double-checked that he had everything he needed for their excursion. Julian pulled out his map and looked it over carefully, looking for a new area to explore as he got ready for his trip. He cherished the excitement of exploring new places and the sense of adventure it brought. He observed a little open area that he had never been to while he studied the map. Julian made the decision to travel to this region, eager to discover a new hiking site. He made sure to pack his car with everything he would need for his trek. His loyal dog Spike leapt into the back seat, anxious to go on the trip with Julian. Julian was accustomed to bringing Spike along with him on every trip, and he couldn't bear the thought of not doing so. Julian had no idea that this adventure would be unlike any other when he began it. He couldn't have known that at their destination, something unexpected and maybe even dangerous awaited them. As Julian drove around the mountain, he began to realize that the area didn't match the map he had studied earlier. He had expected to find a large open space where Spike could run and play, but instead, there was a dense forest in front of him. Julian couldn't understand why the map seemed to be wrong. He thought to himself, "My map must be old." But even as he thought this, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this forest. Julian hesitated for a moment, considering whether to turn back or to continue on and explore the forest. He knew that there could be dangers lurking in the unknown, but he also couldn't resist the pull of adventure. Eventually, he decided to continue on, keeping a close eye on his surroundings and being extra vigilant as he and Spike made their way through the dense trees. After taking a nice long break to rest and enjoy the scenery, Julian was ready to continue his hike. He called out for Spike, expecting his dog to come bounding back to him as usual. But to Julian's surprise, Spike didn't return. Julian couldn't understand why his dog would wander off like this, especially since they were in an unfamiliar place. His dog had a knack for finding his way back to Julian, no matter where they were. But this day had been anything but ordinary, and Julian couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this forest. He decided to search for Spike, calling out his dog's name and looking around for any sign of him. Julian retraced his steps, trying to find Spike by walking back along the route they had taken. However, despite his efforts, he couldn't find his dog anywhere. Frustrated and worried, Julian decided to go back to the spot where they had stopped for lunch, thinking that Spike might have returned there. However, as he tried to find his way back to the spot, Julian realized that he couldn't seem to locate it. Everything looked so similar that he couldn't be sure if he was going in the right direction. Julian couldn't understand how he could be lost in a place that he had just been. He was sure that he had taken the right path, but now everything looked unfamiliar. As he continued to search, Julian couldn't shake the feeling of confusion and concern that was growing inside of him. He knew that he needed to find his way back to his car and get out of this strange forest as soon as possible. As Julian looked around the open field, he saw something moving behind an old willow tree. It was hard to see what it was because it was hidden in the shadows. But Julian couldn't shake the feeling that there was something there. He wondered what kind of creatures might be living in this forest, as it didn't seem like many humans visited this area. Then, Julian heard a strange sound coming from behind the willow tree. It was a small, high-pitched whine, like a creak or a whine of pain. Julian couldn't quite identify the source of the noise, but he knew that it wasn't natural. He approached the willow tree cautiously, trying to get a better look at what was hidden in the shadows. As he got closer, he realized that there was something there, and it was unlike anything he had ever seen before. As Julian approached the willow tree, he was relieved to see Spike emerge from behind it. "Don't go running off again, Spike!" Julian scolded his dog, relieved to have found him. However, as he looked closer at Spike, he noticed that something was different about his dog. Spike seemed a bit on edge, and he had an unusual look in his eyes that Julian had never seen before. Julian couldn't understand what could have caused this change in his normally calm and composed dog. Had Spike encountered something in the forest that had frightened him? Julian couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about this place, and he knew that he needed to get out of the forest as soon as possible. He gathered his things and called for Spike to follow him, eager to return to the safety and familiarity of home. As Julian prepared to leave the forest, he thought about letting Spike rest and returning home. However, he noticed that Spike seemed to want to stay in this place for some reason. Julian found this a bit strange, as Spike had never acted this way before. Despite his initial inclination to leave, Julian found himself feeling a strong urge to stay in the forest and learn more about it. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something special about this place, and he felt a strong desire to explore it further. Julian couldn't understand why he felt this way, but he knew that he couldn't ignore the pull of curiosity. He decided to stay a while longer, hoping to uncover the secrets that the forest seemed to be hiding. Spike seemed to sense Julian's decision and fell into step alongside him as they continued their exploration. As Julian and Spike walked through the forest, they came across a small gravel path that seemed to lead deeper into the trees. Alongside the path, Julian noticed a trail of white flowers that he had never seen before. The flowers seemed to give off a sweet, intoxicating scent that made Julian feel a bit lightheaded. He couldn't resist the urge to bend down and take a sniff, and he was immediately struck by the enchanting aroma. Spike, meanwhile, was running around like crazy, rolling through the flowers and barking happily. Julian couldn't help but laugh at his dog's playful antics, and he was tempted to join in. Despite his curiosity, Julian couldn't shake the feeling that there was something unusual about these flowers, and he decided to be cautious as he and Spike continued their exploration. As Julian and Spike explored the forest, Julian lost all sense of time. The sun began to set, and the sky turned a beautiful shade of orange as the light faded. Julian couldn't help but marvel at the beauty of the scene, feeling like he was in a magical place. He had completely forgotten why he was here and what he was doing, and he was content to simply wander through the forest, taking in all of the sights and sounds around him. Spike had run ahead of Julian and was out of sight but Julian wasn't paying attention. He was too caught up in the beauty of the forest to worry about where his dog had gone. As the light continued to fade, Julian couldn't shake the feeling that this place was special and that he was meant to be here. He knew that he would have to leave eventually, but for now, he was content to simply soak in the magic of the forest. As Julian walked through the forest, all he could think about were the sounds and colors around him. Everything seemed to be intensified, and he couldn't help but feel like he was in some sort of dream-like state. The trees seemed to flow in the wind, reminding Julian of the waves in the sea. The birds were chirping the most beautiful songs he had ever heard, and Julian couldn't believe that he was experiencing this in real life. Despite the surreal feeling of the forest, Julian knew that this was not a dream. He was fully awake and aware, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was meant to be here. He continued to wander through the trees, letting the sights and sounds wash over him as he marveled at the beauty of the forest. Julian awoke in the same clearing where he had first encountered the eerie white flowers, disoriented and unsure how he ended up back there. His map was missing and his phone had no signal, leaving him stranded in the forest with only his dog Spike for guidance. Struggling with a foggy memory and growing unease, Julian followed Spike, hoping to retrace their path. Along the way, they encountered a strange plant that seemed to emanate an otherworldly energy, prompting Julian to record it for proof. When his phone mysteriously lost power, he cut a piece of the plant, desperate to uncover its secrets, but the act only deepened his sense of foreboding. Feeling the forest's oppressive atmosphere closing in, Julian's desperation drove him to consume part of the plant, leading to a psychedelic experience that distorted reality. In this altered state, he navigated his way out of the forest and stumbled onto the highway, shaken but alive. As he left the bizarre, mysterious woods behind, Julian vowed never to return, haunted by the strange events and the plant's ominous presence.